is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kate Horton. I'm a transportation planner with the Memphis Metropolitan Planning Organization, and I'd like to welcome you to today's virtual public meeting for the fiscal year 26-29 Transportation Improvement Program. This kicks off the first of our public meetings that will be going on for the next lunch and learns for the next 3 days, and all the meetings for each of the 3 days will be the same content presented at each. To get us started, I just want to go through a couple housekeeping items. So we're using the GoToWebinar software format. And all participants in today's meeting are in a listener mode only. The meeting format will be a presentation that will be followed by time for both questions and answers. And we'll go over in just a second where you can leave if you've got any questions or comments throughout the presentation, or you can leave those within the question box. Today with the webinar, you're able to join using your PC, your tablet, or your phone. Can also call in, folks may be able to call in and listen as well. If you would like to leave any questions or comments, these will be addressed at the end of the presentation as time permits. And please, just as a reminder, to keep it applicable to the information that's presented, and also provided in a respectful manner. If you don't have a chance to leave a comment today, or you think of something after the meeting, feel free to contact us at our office. Information and our contact information is on the screen, and we'll also have it available at the end of the presentation, so no need to feel like you've got to write this down quickly. So if you have joined using your tablet or your PC or your phone, you should see on your app a place to be able to leave questions or comments. It's called the question box. There you're able to type something in, and myself and staff will be able to read those comments, so they won't be viewable to everybody in today's meeting, but just come directly to us. And then at the end, I'll be reading out those questions and answering again as the time permits. Also on your screen, you should be able to see a place where a flyer has been uploaded that shows just an overview of information related to the TIP document. And that's in a section that it would be either called handouts or materials, depending on how you've joined in the meeting today. All right, so now that we've got the housekeeping items behind us, let's get started with today's agenda. So as part of the presentation, I'm going to give an overview of what both the MPO and the TIP are. You'll notice there are quite a few acronyms with transportation planning. I'm going to try to use as few of those as possible, and also give a good description of what those are, so you'll have an understanding as we continue with the presentation. Also, I'm going to give an overview of where we are with the development of the TIP, along with our public outreach engagement to date, funding and project summary of projects included within the TIP, next steps, and then, as I mentioned earlier, question comment period at the end. So today's meeting is set up from 12 to 1, and the way we'll be doing the format is right now I'll be giving the first presentation from 12 to 12:30, and then at 12:30 we'll restart the presentation, and I'll give it a second time, the same presentation again for anybody who was late to join or just would like to stay on to listen to more. Okay, so let's get started with an overview. You may be asking yourself, okay, what is the Memphis MPO? What is an MPO? So an MPO stands for a Metropolitan Planning Organization. Federal regulations require that MPOs are to be established in areas that have an urbanized population of 50,000 or more. So the Memphis MPO urban area covers what you see in the map here on the screen. So the planning boundary is that dark red line. It includes all of Shelby County and DeSoto County. So Shelby County in Tennessee, DeSoto County in Mississippi, and then a portion of Fayette County in Tennessee and a portion of Marshall County in Mississippi. So the Memphis MPO is responsible for transportation planning and programming of transportation funding for jurisdictions within that planning boundary that I just spoke of. And one kind of interesting fact before going on to the next screen. So there are roughly about a little over 400 MPOs nationally. So we're one of over 400 nationwide. Okay, so now that you know what an MPO is, I want to explain why we're here today. So what is the TIP? So the TIP stands for the Transportation Improvement Program. And what it is it's a short range program. So short range thinking about a 4-year period that supports the vision of the regional transportation, which is the MPO region's long range transportation. So thinking about long range, meaning out 20, 25, even up to 30 years out into the future. The TIP document is fiscally constrained. We'll talk a little bit more about the funding later on in the presentation, but just when you think about, as we're going along, when you think about fiscal constraint, mainly just think about the projects that you see within the TIP can exceed the expected amount of funding that's going to be coming to our area within that time period. The TIP is, the document itself is a prerequisite to receiving federal transportation funds. So the document itself is a federally required document that we must do to be able to allow our region to receive federal funds for transportation projects. So it's important in that meaning. So as a federal document, of course, that means that we must comply with applicable laws and regulations that touch on a number of things, including conforming with air quality regulations. And the Transportation Improvement Program, or the TIP, includes a list of or a number of prioritized multimodal projects. And we'll go into that a little bit more later on the presentation as well. So exactly what multimodal types of projects are. Okay, so you may be asking yourself, one, why is the TIP even being updated? So if you've got this TIP in place, why does it need to be updated? And as I mentioned in the previous slide, so it covers a 4-year period. So we want to make sure that to stay compliant, that we are updating to cover the next 4-year period. So our current TIP covers fiscal years 2023 to 2026. And our current TIP was adopted in September of year 2022. This update is going to cover fiscal years, the next 4 years, so fiscal years 26 to 29, and we are on target to adopt this next TIP cycle in next month. You will see, or you may have noticed there's an overlapping fiscal year 2026, and we always ensure that we do have an overlapping year to make sure that we stay in compliance. When you think about the fiscal year, so we follow a federal fiscal year, which begins October 1, the calendar year prior to. So 26 would begin October 1, 25. All right. In addition to thinking about just covering 4-year period, we also want to make sure that we stay in compliance with the current transportation legislation. We want to make sure that projects continue to support local priorities for our region. And as an MPO, we also work very closely with the DOTs, so Department of Transportation, both within the 2 states that as a bi-state MPO that we cover. That's with TDOT and on the Tennessee side and MDOT on the Mississippi side. Okay, so from the previous slide, you know now that a tip is adopted about every 3 years. And you may be asking yourself, okay, it's adopted every 3 years. Well, how long does it take to actually get to that point? And the tip process itself is fairly lengthy because of the number of both just the time period to develop and also the number of reviews that are included a part of the process. It's about a year to a year and a half long development time. So this timeline, I'm not going to go through all the dates, but if you look at the far left, that's when we kicked off the tip. So we kicked off the development almost or right at 1 year ago today. So we started last fall with workshops with our engineering and technical committee. That's made up of engineers and planners within all those jurisdictions that you saw on that first slide that are covered within the MPO planning area. After the kickoff of the tip, anything that you see on this timeline that has the quotation mark box with the plus, that really shows any time that we've had outreach with the public as far as review periods. So the first big one that happened in November of last year, that was the development of the criteria that's used to help us rank and score projects for inclusion into the tip. So that was approved at our November technical committee and transportation policy board committee of the MPO, which is made up of mayors within the jurisdiction where you live, if you are within the MPO area in Tennessee or Mississippi. So following the approval of the tip criteria, just after that, that's when the application process opened up. And you may have been a part of one of the public meetings in your city or county where the jurisdiction shared projects that were being submitted within Bartlett or Collierville or Germantown or South Haven or Olive Branch and more. Following that, those projects were ranked and scored for inclusion, and the final list of projects went before the board for approval. That happened in May of this year. And then since that period, we've worked on the development of the draft tip document, which has gone out for reviews with consultation agencies, the public, which is where we are today, as well as both the DOTs and federal agencies. Where you see that big "we are here," that's where we are, the public review period. And following that will be the adoption of the tip, which is on schedule for September the 11th. And after the tip is, we finally get to that point. You can see we've gone through a lot of reviews up to this point. Then we go through the federal review period, which takes place at just after the board meeting begins. That overlaps or goes on for several months, and then the final tip is in place, anticipated to be in place at the beginning of next year. Okay, so you may be wondering, how has the public, so many people on the call like you, how has that engagement happened over the last year and a half period? So the Memphis MPO, we have a website. On our website, memphismpo.org, there is a webpage that's dedicated to the tip that has showed just places along the review period, all those key milestones. So project list approval, the ranking approval, the tip document itself, which is available online right now for review and download. We've also had videos in both English and Spanish, virtual public meetings like the one that we're having today, and an example of like one of the initial handouts that we did, and then which is similar to the version that you can download through the GoToWebinar today. And then, as I spoke about earlier on the previous slide, additionally, individual city and town meetings that were held within your engineering or public works in each one of the cities where you live. Okay, so we've touched on what an MPO is, what a TIP is, and now let's really get into the meat of the thinking about both the funding and the projects that are included within the TIP. So this just in the middle there, just to kind of orient yourself for the slide, it shows the whole MPO planning area. So you'll see on the top, Tennessee, Mississippi, geography wise, all of Shelby County, a portion of Fayette, and all of DeSoto County, and a portion of Marshall and Mississippi. So as a whole, the MPO region received, or the TIP includes about almost $3 billion in funding for that area. On the Tennessee side, it's a little over $2 billion, and on the Mississippi, just under $1 billion. The funding comes from a number of different federal, state, and local funding sources. And again, kind of touching on the fiscal constraint portion, it's important to note that, again, the funding program to projects cannot exceed the expected revenue that's coming to the area. Would like to mention that the $3 billion, this is more funding than what we typically see and program within a 4-year fiscal cycle. And that is because of, and we'll talk about the projects here in just a minute, but a number of larger capital projects, both on the Tennessee and Mississippi side. So one example of that, of those projects, you may be familiar with the I-55 bridge replacement project. That project itself is almost a $1 billion project that is made up of both federal grants and also state matches. On the Mississippi side, there's several large capital projects. One being upcoming the I-55 widening project, which that project itself is a close to $155 million construction project. So you can see how some larger capital projects can quickly make up that $3 billion number that I spoke about. All right, so next I want to touch a little bit on the types of projects that are included in the TIP. So as far as just sheer number, there's approximately 150 different types of projects. So quite a few projects in our region. These projects are all different types. So at the beginning, I mentioned that the TIP includes multimodal projects. So to kind of go into explaining what that means. So if you think about, if you can see these two pie charts, you see there's a pretty even distribution of different types of projects included in the TIP. So if you think about capital, think about if you were just driving down a road and you're seeing a project, lanes being added or new roadway being built, in a general sense, that's what we would consider a capital project. But in addition to that, which really makes up financially a big number, but as far as number of projects, really a smaller number, are largely, our TIP is made up of what we would consider grouping projects. So a little bit smaller in scale, but could be everything from repaving projects, signalization, so new signals or improvement to signals, intersection improvements, things like greenways and trails, which we consider pedestrian and bicycle improvements, bridge improvements, so things like new bridges. So if a structure is getting old and it needs to replace, funding is provided as part of TIP projects to be able to provide improvements and maintaining the current infrastructure that we have of the transportation system in the region. Okay, so now that we've talked about funding as a whole, we've talked about the types of projects, want to share just a few projects, both the capital that we talked about and then also groupings. These in that green color show projects, Tennessee projects, blue on within Mississippi. I do want to mention this is just a very small sample of projects within the TIP document itself that's available on the MPO's website. You can go in and see a full listing of all the projects. One thing that that's included here with a few of the different projects, so like the I-55 bridge replacement, the I-55 widening project to Mississippi, to name just two, are you'll see words on the screen that include construction, right-of-way, PE, and I want to just give a general understanding of what those terms mean. So for the development of a project, it goes through four major main phases of project development. So for, first being engineering, so PE or engineering that's on the that includes the environmental. You may have heard the term NEPA, so that's what is looking at environmental proving that comes first for a project. Next, as part of PE, that includes the design of a project. So you think, okay, before a project's been built, it's got to go through the design. So that's the second phase. The third phase would be right away. So even if a project doesn't include the acquisition or acquiring of land, it still is required to go through a verification process for right away. And then finally, that gets us to construction. So depending on the scale of a project, to go from that first initial environmental phase to construction could take anywhere from 8 to 10 year period of time. So each one of those phases, thinking about that being a minimum of 9 months, but could be up to a maximum of 3 years, depending on the scale of a project. So now that you have a good sense of just the timeline development, the TIP itself includes funding for all those phases of a project. So every TIP cycle won't include construction. It could, if it's a project that is just getting started, like for instance, on the screen, you see the Getwell Road widening, that is PE and NEPA. That means that project is just getting started with the initial phases of it. Okay, in addition to capital projects, we spoke about all the different types of multimodal grouping projects. So when you think about a grouping project, just generally think of something smaller in scale and then a mix of different project types. So this screen shows different greenways and trail projects that are included throughout the region. Also things like intersection improvements and roundabouts, and also other types of transit operation and maintenance types projects. Again, to see a full listing, would recommend going to the TIP document on the MPO website to see projects that are specifically within your region that you may be interested in your city or county. Okay, so hopefully that gave you a good understanding of who we are as an MPO and what we're doing with the development of the TIP. And you may be wondering, okay, so we're in the public review period right now. So where do we go now? What's coming up next? So the public review period ends on August the 26th. After that, we are on schedule to take the plan for adoption at our September 11th meeting. And when we were going through the timeline earlier, you saw those review periods. So it's really important that we stay on schedule to make sure that we meet our deadlines. So after the adoption, we'll immediately begin the final state and review periods, which takes several months. And the TIP is on schedule for final approval to begin early next year. So once that TIP is fully in place, that really allows the engineers in your jurisdiction begin the project development process. So once the TIP's in place, that's when the engineers can start moving forward. So if it's a new project, that's when the engineering portion can get started. If it's a project that's been ongoing, that's when the net funding would come for the next phase of a project. So if a project is ready to go to construction, like the ones that you saw that had construction listed in that table earlier, that's when they could really get started to begin the construction phase of a project. Thank everybody today for your participation. And if you do want to learn more, this is our website address, memphismpo.org. And you can always also contact our office. This is both our physical office address, phone number, and an email contact information.